Hello and welcome to the Creative Mankind podcast. I'm your host, Vencio G. Maceler Jr. from Iloilo City, Philippines. I established this podcast to spread the accurate knowledge of God across the world and help people not to be ignorant of God and His teachings. This is episode 2, God in Family, part 1. This topic is the number one demand of my audience. It is more comprehensive than the first episode. The future contents of this episode will be made available in different parts. Now, survival, health, and increase of our family are very important. Wealth and prosperity come second. But these ideas are the quote-unquote Old Testament way of thinking. Now, starting from the Christian era, Jesus Christ has established a new family. We are now embracing a new family structure. Nevertheless, we continue to help our old family. Our Father is God in heaven. Our mother is the church. For the Catholic faith, it is the Mama Mary and also the church. Our brothers and sisters are the Christians of the church. Our works are to do the will of God. Let's go back from the beginning of what the family is all about. The Lord said to Noah, when quote, "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 2 of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate, and also 7 of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep these various kinds alive throughout the earth. 7 days from now, I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe out from the face of the earth every living creature I have made." And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. Genesis chapter 7, verse 1 to 5. Noah's family is the best example of what a family should be. They stayed away from the evils of men and women of the world at that time. The world was filled with murders, hatred, adulteries, violence, corruption, idolatries, etc. There were no decent laws at that time, and the people were out of control. But Noah's family preserved themselves from all that. They instead listened to the invisible God and obeyed his every command. They built an ark and gathered all the animals, birds, reptiles, etc. inside the ark. Well, it took him many years to prepare for this, and many people probably thought he was insane. Anyway, he did it, and the flood came. The people and the animals died in the great deluge. As a family for God, we must avoid all the evils that the world presented to us. The opinions of non-believers doesn't matter. We must always know the will of God for us and do what God commands. Another great example is Abraham and his family. He followed the commands of God everywhere he went. It took him a great deal of faith to obey the invisible God despite the difficulties he encountered in life. Abraham has faced famine, enemies, death, destruction, trials, tribulation, etc. God promised Abraham's children will be as numerous as the stars of the sky and the sand of the seashore. During desperate times, Abraham has yet any children. His wife used her maidservant Hagar to have a child for her. Open parenthesis, Genesis chapter 16, verse 1 to 4. Close parenthesis. Later, Abraham and Sarah have a son at their old age. At that time, Abraham only has 2 children, and the children of his men servants and maid servants are more numerous. As his son Isaac grew old, Abraham directed his most trusted menservant to look for a wife. He is to look for Abraham's relatives to get a wife for Isaac. open parenthesis, Genesis chapter 24, verse 34 to 41, close parenthesis. His servant found Rebekah by the way she reacted to him and his camels. Abraham trusted and believed in God till the end of his life. The promises of God did not yet occur in his lifetime. As a follower of God, one must have persevering, loyal faith, even if things doesn't go your way. As a leader of your family, you must have faith, perseverance, loyalty, humility, and wisdom in everything that you do. God preferred Jacob than his older brother Esau. When Rebekah became pregnant, she inquired of God of what her children will become. She received this prophecy from God. Open quote, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. End quote. Genesis chapter 25, verse 23. Jacob was a trickster. He tricked Esau and his father Isaac. He pretended he was Esau and took his father's blessing. His parents sent him away from Esau and looked for a wife from other relatives. There he found Rachel and Leah, daughters of his uncle Laban. But he loved Rachel more than Leah. God, however, made Leah more fertile and childbearing than Rachel. Leah bore him 6 sons. Rachel bore him 2 sons. Rachel's maidservant Bilhah bore him 2 sons. Leah's maidservant Zilpah bore him 2 sons. The names of Jacob's sons are the following. Number 1, Reuben. Number 2, Simeon. Number 3, Levi. Number 4, Judah. Number 5, Dan. Number 6, Naphtali. Number 7, Gad. Number 8, Asher. Number 9, Issachar. Number 10, Zebulun. Number 11, Joseph. And number 12, Benjamin. These are the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob worked for his uncle in 20 years and fled. Laban, however, caught up with him and they made an agreement. God later changed Jacob's name to Israel because he wrestled or struggled with God. The man, however, wrenched Israel's hip after touching it. Israel went home limping after the ordeal. That's why the Israelites never eat the tendon of a hip of an animal or bird. As a leader of your own family, company, or group, you have to be smart. Yes, there are times you have to work hard, but you must work smart. This is how you can succeed in life. You shouldn't rely on or always follow the status quo. You must find a way to gain profits no matter what it takes. Don't get me wrong, God wants us to succeed and become prosperous. Joseph the Dreamer. Israel or Jacob has this most favorite son. His name is Joseph. He talks about his dreams to his parents and brothers. These made his brothers more jealous of him. One day he was alone when he visited his brothers and they plotted to kill him. Instead, they agreed to sell him to the Midianites or the Ishmaelites. They in turn sold him to the Egyptians. Joseph continued to live a righteous life and depended upon God in everything he does. One day he was sent into prison due to a false accusation. Yet he continued to do what is right and help people. He rose to the ranks of a manager in prison. He interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh's officials, who were also sent there. The chief cupbearer got out, and it took years before he remembered his promise to Joseph. Pharaoh had a dream, and the chief cupbearer referred Joseph as the interpreter. Joseph got out of prison and was shaved and appeared before Pharaoh. He interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. Because of this opportunity, he rose to the ranks of being the second in command of all Egypt. His job is to gather all the food to storehouses in Egypt and prepare for the coming 7 years of famine. When famine arrived, all the, all the surrounding lands and people of Egypt were suffering. Israel's family were also suffering with dwindling food supplies in Canaan. Due to the severe famine, Israel sent his sons to Egypt and buy grain. Joseph saw his brothers and accused them of spying. He remembered his dreams about them and said, open quote, "You are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected," end quote. He insisted that they are spies and said, open quote, "It is just as I told you. You are spies, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies." End quote. He put them all in custody for 3 days. Joseph knew who they were, but they don't know who the governor is. Who they don't know the governor. Sorry, but they don't know the governor is actually Joseph. On the third day, Joseph said to them, open quote, "Do this, and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back for your starving households. But you must bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified, and that you may not die." End quote. This they proceeded to do. They said to one another, end quote, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress come upon us." End quote. Reuben replied, open quote, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood." End quote. They did not realize that Joseph could understand them, since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep, but then turned back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes until they brought their youngest brother Benjamin. Joseph sent them back with their grain and provisions and returned their money of silver in their sacks. The brothers were frightened because of this, and it took them a while before they came back to Egypt. The famine continued to be severe, and Israel's family have eaten all the grain they have bought from Egypt. The family had a discussion because Israel doesn't want to bring Benjamin with them. Judah insisted and swore he will protect and bring back Benjamin to his father. So Israel decided to gather all the best produce of the land as gifts to the governor of Egypt. They also doubled the silver they gave as payment to Joseph. Joseph saw Benjamin with them and sent them all to his house. The brothers became fearful because they thought the governor wants to punish and enslave them for not paying the previous grains they took. Actually, the Egyptians prepared a banquet for them, and they slept in Joseph's house until noon. At noon, Joseph was there and with his brothers, and they were ordered according to their ages. They were surprised. Benjamin's meal were 5 times more than the rest of them. After the lavish feast, Joseph gave instructions to the steward to return the money. The brothers paid in their respective sacks and put his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. After Joseph's brother left the city, he commanded his steward to pursue them and take Benjamin to become the governor's slave. They all returned to Joseph and begged to release Benjamin. Joseph could no longer control himself and ordered all the Egyptians to leave his house. There Joseph cried and revealed himself to his brothers. He told them not to be distressed or angry for selling him to the Egyptians, because it was part of God's plan. God intended to save their lives from the 7 years of famine. He told them to tell their father about him and leave Canaan and transfer to Goshen in Egypt. He reminded them that there are 5 more years of famine to come. He embraced his brother Benjamin and wept. He kissed all of his brothers and wept. Then they talked with him. Pharaoh and officials heard that Joseph's brothers have come. They were pleased about the news. Pharaoh commanded Joseph to bring carts and provisions for their families. They are to live in the best land of Egypt. Joseph gave new clothes to each of his brothers, but Benjamin was given 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. He sent his father 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, and another 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and other provisions for his journey. Upon seeing these things, Israel was convinced Joseph was alive. He and his family, open parenthesis, sons, grandsons, daughters, and granddaughters, close parenthesis, brought all their livestock and belongings to Egypt. The members of Israel's family that settled in Egypt were 70 in total. Judah went ahead of the family to ask Joseph the direction of Goshen. Joseph readied his chariot and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. As soon as his father appeared, he embraced his father and cried for a long time. Joseph told Pharaoh that his family are shepherds and tended livestock. He also advised his father Israel and his brothers to say the same things. So they were allowed to settle in Goshen because shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians. Joseph presented 5 of his brothers to Pharaoh. Pharaoh asked what their occupation is. They said they were shepherds and experiencing severe famine and had no pasture for their flocks. They asked permission Pharaoh to allow them to settle in Goshen. Pharaoh permitted them to live in Goshen and asked Joseph if there is someone in his family who has special ability and serve in Pharaoh's livestock. Then Joseph brought his father Jacob in and presented him before Pharaoh. After Jacob blessed Pharaoh, Pharaoh asked him, "How old are you?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The years of my pilgrimage are 130. My years have been few and difficult, and they do not equal the years of the pilgrimage of my fathers." Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from his presence. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers in Egypt and gave them property in the best parts of the land, the district of Ramesses, as Pharaoh directed. Genesis chapter 47, verses 7 to 11. Sometime later, Israel became ill. So Joseph took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, to their grandfather. Israel kissed and embraced them. Israel said to Joseph, open quote, "I never expected to see your face again. And now God has allowed me to see your children too," end quote. Then Joseph removed them from Israel's knees and bowed down with his face to the ground. And Joseph took both of them, Ephraim on his right towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh on his left toward Israel's right hand, and brought them close to him. But Israel reached out for his right hand and put it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger. And crossing his arms, he put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn. Then he blessed Joseph and said, open quote, "May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless these boys. May they be called by my name and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they increase greatly upon the earth." End quote. When Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased. So he took hold of his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to him, open quote, "No, my father, this is one of the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." End quote. But his father refused and said, open quote, "I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people, and he too will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a group of nations." End quote. He blessed them that day and said, open quote, "In your name will Israel pronounce his blessing." Open quote, "May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." End quote. So he put Ephraim head of Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, open quote, "I am about to die, but God will be with you and take you back to the land of your fathers, and to you as one who is over your brothers. I give the ridge of land I took from the Amorites with my sword and my bow." End quote. Open parenthesis, Genesis chapter 48, verses 11 to 22, close parenthesis. Israel then assembled all his 12 sons, prophesied, and blessed them. He gave his final instructions to bury him in the cave in the Machpelah field near Mamre, bought from Ephron the Hittite. Joseph directed the physicians to embalm his father for 40 days. The Egyptians mourned him for 70 days. Joseph asked permission from Pharaoh to bury his father to the designated cave. Pharaoh allowed him, and all of Pharaoh's officials followed Joseph to the burial site. All the members of his family and the families of his brothers were also there. A large company of chariots and horsemen also went with him. There Joseph observed a 7-day solemn ceremony of mourning for his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, open quote, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" End quote. So they sent word to Joseph, saying, open quote, "Your father left these instructions before he died." Open quote, "This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly." End quote. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. End quote. When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. Open quote. "We are your slaves," end quote, they said. But Joseph said to them, end quote, open quote, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." End quote. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Open parenthesis, Genesis chapter 50, verse 15 to 21, close parenthesis. The story of Joseph the dreamer ends here, but there are a lot of lessons to be learned from this. The most important lesson is this: whenever bad things happen in to our families, you must never give up. Persevere with your faith in God, pray to God always, and ask for his help. We wait for the Lord's help and just do our best and just do our best we humanly can. This is what it means to wait for the Lord. Continue to do what is right and just. No matter what happens, put your trust in God. For those struggling to make ends meet and surrounded by so many evils, here are the passages you should remember. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and your plans will succeed. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 3. In whatever you do, offer it to God. Trust Him. Believe, and He will make you succeed. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in the future. Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 11. For those who put their trust in God and follow His commands, He has plans to prosper them. So if things look bad, never give up. Do your best and wait for the Lord. God had planned something better for us so that only together with us would they be made perfect. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 40. The lives of men are like the blade of grass. They are here today and gone tomorrow. So don't believe everything you see or hear about the world, but study and trust the words and teachings of God, since they are more important than this world. God had planned for those who follows Him. God had planned for those who follows them. This world is not the best place for us. We are here only to do His will, and He never fails to reward those who belong to Him. Another lesson from Joseph the dreamer is this. He forgave those who offended him. Joseph cried because his grudges, ego, and pride are fighting against his love and humility. In the end, the goodness within him triumphed because of his prayer and devotion to God. We should let go of our grudges and ego. It's never wrong to cry and express our feelings. It's never about pride and being greater than others, but it's about our love to God and our desire to love others. Despite the past, Joseph continued to provide for his extended family and show kindness to them. Moses. The Israelites became more numerous than the Egyptians. A new king rose to power who doesn't know Joseph, ruled Egypt. He was concerned about the growing Israelites and decided to oppress them. He assigned slave masters and ruthlessly exercised forced labor over them. They built Pithom and Ramesses as store cities for Pharaoh. The king of Egypt commanded the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, to kill male Hebrew babies. The midwives, however, did not do what the king of Egypt told them. So the king summoned them and asked them. They answered, open quote, Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive, end quote. Due to this, God rewarded the midwives with families of their own. Pharaoh gave orders for all his people to throw every Hebrew boy to the Nile River. As you can see on that, not all lies are evil. The lie of the midwives saved a lot of lives of Hebrew babies. This can be considered as a white lie and it's not evil. And God rewards those who saves the lives of innocent little ones. So if your leader commands you to do evil, do what God requires instead. God loves every human being. There is Amram, a Levite man who married Jochebed, a Levite woman. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. For 3 months she hid the baby to avoid being killed by Pharaoh's men. Then she made a papyrus basket coated with tar and pitch and placed the baby in it. She put it among the reeds along the Nile River. She told the sister of the baby to keep watch of it. Pharaoh's daughter went to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the river bank. She saw the basket among the reeds and told her slave girl to get it. She felt sorry for the baby. The sister of the baby asked Pharaoh's daughter if she will look for a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby. Pharaoh's daughter agreed. His sister took the mother of the child to become his nurse. After the child grew older, he was taken to Pharaoh's daughter to become her son. The princess named him Moses. As Moses became an adult, he realized he's an Israelite. He watched his people in hard labor. He also saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. After seeing no one else around, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The Hebrew, however, told others that Moses killed the Egyptian. When Pharaoh heard the report that Moses killed an Egyptian, he ordered to kill him. Moses fled to Midian and sat down by a well. Some shepherds tried to drive away the daughters of a priest of Midian who were drawing water for the sheep. Moses came to the daughters' rescue and watered the flocks. The daughters of Reuel reported this event to their father. They invited Moses to eat. Reuel, or Jethro, gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom. Moses was called by God to become his prophet and rescue his people Israel. Here we learn the importance of a baby who became an important person later on. Moses has a humble beginning and he murdered an Egyptian. Yet God called him to become a prophet and bring the Israelites to their promised land. Every member of the family has a role to play in the plan of God. We may not be perfect, but we must offer our service to the will of God despite our shortcomings. Genealogy of Moses. Levi has 3 sons, Gershom, Kohath, and Merari. Kohath has 4 sons, Amram, Ishhar, Hebron, and Uzziel. The father of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam is Amram. The mother is Jochebed. Moses and Zipporah had 2 sons, Gershom and Eliezer. Aaron and Elisheba have 4 sons, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Itamar. Eleazar and Putiel have a son, Phinehas. During the Old Covenant, the long genealogies were important for the Israelites. But after the New Covenant with Jesus Christ, the apostles think that the long line of ancestry were disregarded. They said that it's no longer a guarantee of being saved or their names written in the book of life. You have to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior. Passover. In the first month of Abib, the Israelites are to observe the Passover feast or meal. This is also the Last Supper that Jesus Christ and his disciples were celebrating before his death. This is a yearly commemoration when God killed all the firstborn of Egypt. No foreigner is to eat of it unless he is circumcised. Each family is to prepare a 1-year-old lamb or goat without defects at the 10th day of the month. Then on the twilight of the 14th day, they are to slaughter the lamb. They are to gather some blood on a basin. They are to use a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood of the lamb on a basin. Put the blood in the sides of the top of the door frames. Put the blood on the sides and the top of the door frames. Pour the remaining blood on the ground. They are to roast the lamb over a fire. They are to eat it with bitter herbs and unleavened bread. They are to eat it with their clothes tucked in, their belts, sandals on feet, and staff on hand. Any leftover the next morning must be burned. On the third week that follows, they are to celebrate the week of unleavened bread. On the first day of the third week, they are to do no work and gather for a sacred assembly. They are only allowed to prepare their food on that day. They have to remove any yeast in their house. They must eat unleavened bread during that week. On the seventh day, they are to do no work and gather for the last time. The Passover is a ceremony passed on to the Israelites to remember the power of God over the gods of Egypt, and how he precisely executed the firstborn of all Egypt without killing the firstborn of Israel. It shows that he is a God above all other gods, and we must precisely obey the words of God in order to live. The will of God is greater than what we want. Our families must align and follow the words of God. Priests. According to the laws of God, only Aaron and his sons were allowed to become priests. But before this, God spoke to the Israelites. Open quote. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, it will be for me a kingdom of priests and holy nation. End quote. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. End quote. Exodus chapter 19, verse 5 to 6. Something happened along the way that God only considered Aaron and his sons as priests. Open quote. Appoint Aaron and his sons to serve as priests. Anyone else who approaches the sanctuary must be put to death. End quote. Numbers chapter 3, verse 10. Open quote. Bring Aaron and his sons to the entrance of the tent of meeting and wash them with water. And dress Aaron in the sacred garments. Anoint him with and consecrate him so he may serve me as priests. Bring his sons and dress them in tunics. Anoint them just as you anoint their father. Anoint them just as you anointed their father, so they may serve me as priests. The anointing will be to a priesthood that will continue for all generations to come. End quote. Exodus chapter 40, verses 12 to 15. Korah and other Israelites revolted against the Aaronite priesthood. They too wanted to become priests, but God became very angry against them. Korah's rebellion. Numbers chapter 16, verses 1 to 50. Korah, son of Ishar, son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and certain Reubenites, Datan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On, son of Pelet, became insolent and rose up against Moses. With them there are 250 Israelite men, well-known community leaders who have been appointed members of the council. They came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, open quote, "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly?" End quote. When Moses heard this, he fell face down. Then he said to Korah and all his followers, open quote, "In the morning the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy, and he will have that person come near him. The man he chooses he will cause to come near him. You, Korah, and all your followers are to do this. Take censers, and tomorrow put fire incense in them before the Lord. The man the Lord chooses will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone too far." End quote. Moses also said to Korah, open quote, "Now listen, you Levites, isn't it enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the Israelite community and brought you near himself to do the work of the Lord's tabernacle and to stand before the community and minister to them? He has brought you and all your fellow Levites near himself, but now you are trying to get the priesthood too. It is against the Lord that you and all your followers have banded together. Who is Aaron that you should grumble against him?" End quote. Then Moses summoned Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but they said, open quote, "We will not come. Isn't it enough that you have brought us out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert? And now you also want to lord it over us? Moreover, you haven't brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, or given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you gouge out the eyes of these men? No, we will not come." End quote. Then Moses became very angry and said to the Lord, "Do not, open quote, do not accept their offering. I have not taken so much as a donkey from them, nor I have wronged any of them." End quote. Moses said to Korah, open quote, "You take this sin. You and all your followers are to appear before the Lord tomorrow. You and they and Aaron, followers, are to appear before the Lord tomorrow. You and they and Aaron. Each man is to take his censer and put incense. Each man is to take his censer. Each man is to take his censer and put incense in it. 250 censers in all, and present it before the Lord. You and Aaron are to present your censers also." End quote. So each man took his censer, put fire and incense in it, and stood with Moses and Aaron at the entrance of the tent of meeting. When Korah had gathered all his followers in opposition to them in the entrance of the tent of meeting, the glory of the Lord appeared to the entire assembly. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, open quote, "Separate yourselves from this assembly so I can put an end to them at once." End quote. But Moses and Aaron fell face down and cried out, open quote, "O God, God of the spirits of all mankind, will you be angry with the entire assembly when only one man sins?" End quote. Then the Lord said to Moses, open parenthesis, open quote, "Say to the assembly, open quote, move away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram." End quote. Moses got up and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. He warned the assembly, open quote, "Move back," open quote, "move back from the tents of these wicked men. Do not touch anything belonging to them, or you will be swept away because of all their sins." End quote. So they moved away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Dathan and Abiram had come out, and they were standing with their wives, children, and little ones at the entrances of their tent. Then Moses said, open quote, "This is how you will know that the Lord has sent me to do all these things and that it was not my idea. If these men die a natural death and experience only what usually happens to men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about something totally new, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them, and everything that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the grave, then you will know that these men have treated the Lord with contempt." End quote. As soon as he finished saying all this, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them, with their households and all Korah's men and all their possessions. They went down alive into the grave and everything they owned. The earth closed over them. They perished and were gone from the community. At their cries, all the Israelites around them fled, shouting, open quote, "The earth is going to swallow us too." End quote. And fire came out of the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering the incense. The Lord said to Moses, open quote, "Tell Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, to take the censers out of the smoldering remains and scatter the coals some distance away for the censers are holy. The censers of the men who sinned at the cost of their lives. Hammer the censers into sheets to overlay the altar. Hammer the censers into sheets to overlay the altar, for they were presented before the Lord and have become holy. Let them be assigned to the Israelites." End quote. So Eleazar, priest collected the bronze censers brought by those who have been burned up, and he had them hammered out to overlay the altar, as the Lord directed him through Moses. This was to remind the Israelites that no one except a descendant of Aaron should come to burn incense before the Lord, or he would become like Korah and his followers. Next day, the whole Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. Open quote, "You have killed the Lord's people," end quote, they said. But when the assembly gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron and turned toward the tent of meeting, suddenly the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared. Then Moses and Aaron went to the front of the tent of meeting, and the Lord said to Moses, open quote, "Get away from this assembly so I can put an end to them at once," quote. And they fell face down. And Moses said to Aaron, open quote, "Take your censer and put incense in it, along with fire from the altar, and hurry to the assembly to make atonement for them. Wrath has come out of the Lord, and the plague has started." End quote. So Aaron did as Moses said and ran into the midst of the assembly. The plague has already started among the people, but Aaron offered the incense and made atonement for them. He stood between the living and the dead, and the plague stopped. But 14,700 people died from the plague, in addition to those who had died because of Korah. Then Aaron returned to Moses at the entrance to the tent of meeting, for the plague has stopped. God reinforced the Aaronite priesthood with a miracle. Aaron's staff buds. Numbers chapter 17, verses 1 to 13. The Lord said to Moses, open quote, "Speak to the Israelites and get 12 staffs from them, one from the leader of each of their ancestral tribes. Write the name of each man on this staff. On the staff of Levi, write Aaron's name, for there must be one staff for the head of each ancestral tribe. Place them in the tent of meeting in front of the testimony, where I meet with you. The staff belonging to the man I choose will sprout, and I will rid myself of this constant grumbling against you by the Israelites." End quote. So Moses spoke to the Israelites, and their leaders gave him 12 staffs, one the leader of each of their ancestral tribes, and Aaron's staff was among them. Moses placed the staffs before the Lord in the tent of testimony. Next day, Moses entered the tent of the testimony and saw that Aaron's staff, which represented the house of Levi, had not only sprouted but had budded, blossomed, and produced almonds. Then Moses brought out all the staffs from the Lord's presence to all the Israelites. They looked at them, and each man took his own staff. The Lord said to Moses, open quote, "Put back Aaron's staff in front of the testimony to be kept as a sign to the rebellious. This will put an end to their grumbling against me, so that they will not die." End quote. Moses did just as the Lord commanded him. The Israelites said to Moses, open quote, "We will all die. We are lost. We are all lost. Anyone who even comes near the tabernacle of the Lord will die. Are we all going to die?" End quote. Duties of priests and Levites. Numbers chapter 18, verses 1 to 7. The Lord said to Aaron, open quote, "You and your sons and your father's family are to bear the responsibility for offenses against the sanctuary. And you and your sons alone are to bear the responsibility for the offenses against the priesthood. Bring your fellow Levites from your ancestral tribe to join you and assist you when you and your sons minister before the tent of the testimony. They are to be responsible to you and are to perform all the duties of the tent. But they must not go near the furnishings of the sanctuary or the altar, or both they and you will die. They are to join you and be responsible for the care of the tent of meeting, all the work of the tent, and no one else may come near where you are." Open quote, you are to be responsible for the care of the sanctuary and the altar, so that wrath will not fall on the Israelites again. I myself have selected your fellow Levites from among the Israelites as a gift to you, dedicated to the Lord to do the work of the tent of meeting. But only you and your sons may serve as priests in connection with everything at the altar and inside the curtain. I am giving you the service of the priesthood as a gift. Anyone else who comes near the sanctuary must be put to death. End quote. There is also a prophecy against Eli and his sons for abusing the priesthood. First Book of Samuel, chapter 2, verses 27 to 36. Now a man of God came to Eli and said to him, open quote, this is what the Lord says, open quote, I did not clearly reveal myself to your father's house when they were in Egypt under Pharaoh. I chose your father out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, and to wear an ephod in my presence. I also gave your father's house all the offerings made with fire by the Israelites. Why do you scorn my sacrifice and offering that I prescribe for my dwelling? Why do you honor your sons more than me by fattening yourselves on the choice parts of every offering made by my people Israel? End quote. Open quote. Therefore the Lord, the God of Israel declares, open quote, I promised that your house and your father's house would minister before me forever. End quote. But now the Lord declares, open quote, far be from it. No. Open quote, far be it from me. Those who honor me I will honor, but those who despise me will be disdained. The time is coming when I will cut short your strength and the strength of your father's house, so that there will not be an old man in your family line, and you will see distress in my dwelling. Also good will be done to Israel. In your family line there will never be an old man. Every one of you that I do not cut off from my altar will be spared, only to blind your eyes with tears and to grieve your heart, and all your descendants will die in the prime of life. End quote. Open quote. And what happens to your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, will be a sign to you. They will both die on the same day. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and mind. I will firmly establish his house, and he will minister before my anointed one always. Then everyone left in your family line will come and bow down before him for a piece of silver and a crust of bread and plead, open quote, appoint me to some priestly office so I can have food to eat, end quote. This is the end of episode 2, God and Family, part 1. Thank you for listening.